Welcome back to Justification. Many thanks to you for continuing to tune in, and welcome again to another good and healthy morning. Thank you for joining me this morning. Thank you for allowing me to enter into your hearts and into your soul temple. Once again, it's a new week. It's a new opportunity for us to exercise the being within, the devotional character within, allowing that character to do more talking, or to learn how to do more talking than the character of our natural person, allowing our natural person to learn from that person within, from that developing faith within, so that that marriage, it can be what it's supposed to be in its own way, right, sync, in patience and in temperance, and in much frustration, which is the joy of it all. But thank you again for tuning into Justification. We will pick up where we last left off, which was on something absolutely intense. It was the idea of deleting or getting rid of our backup devotional confidence. And we know what this is. We don't have to think hard about it. We don't have to think or ask ourselves what this is, because we know what it is. We know that there is a belief that we have inside of us that we have inherited, or that we have, willingly walked into because it fit our perception at the time. Whatever fit our perception at the time, whatever fit the construct of God and of religion and of spirituality and of devotion and of communion and of path, spiritual devotional path. This is our backup when challenge arises against our faith, when we are even conflicting with our own belief, with our own self. We ended on the note of getting rid of the backup. Getting rid of the backup, challenging the backup, slowly doing without that backup, doing without it at our rate. Because this is what is holding us back from realizing the potential of our faith and the potential of our relationship with the living God. It is more than we need as human beings, more than just believing. We need as human beings more than just experiencing. We will continue to always need, because we are aggravating. We are aggravating. We continually need proof, and despite how much proof may be in front of our face, we will deny it so long as it does not fit our construct. The construct that we have needs to be abandoned. And from our meetings prior up until this time, I've been making room for a very full and unadulterated illustration of this, the core philosophy of justification, but I have not gotten there just as yet, building to it. But each piece, each week that fits into that puzzle, when we get to that point, I wanted to really rock you. I want you to do something with it that goes beyond simply us sitting here and having dialogue. I want it to be more than you simply walking away from our dialogue in thought. I want that thought to be real. And so our last thought was the notion, and we will prove this, the notion of no longer abiding by or entrusting self to the backup. We have a backup faith. We have a backup for everything. Everything that we do, even if we're not even thinking about it, we have a backup for it. And we cannot live this way with our faith. Our faith cannot be determined by a backup confidence. It is either we are in or we are not. It is either all or it is nothing. It can't be partial. It can't be I'm going to believe this much according to my belief tells me to, and no more. It can't be anything but I'm going to experience for the sake of my devotional conversations intelligence. Because that's what matters when you think about it, the intellect of our faith. So with our faith, or faith's intellect, and with our faith going through a process of self-discovery, with this in mind, this leads us to ask, how does this disconnect between us and our backup take place? And Paul gives us an excellent illustration. The illustration in and of itself is utterly vague, and taken out of context makes no right sense. But we have not correctly put this into place, and I'm giving this now so that when we do put this into place, it will all make sense. In the book of Romans, chapter 6 and verse 4. In the book of Romans, chapter 6 and verse 4, there are verses prior, but just highlighting this one verse. Therefore, we are buried with him by baptism into death, that like as Christ was raised up from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we also should walk. How? In newness of life. And before touching on that verse, newness of life. Remember newness of life, because Paul takes this same phrase in the next chapter and he articulates it in a more clear way. In Romans chapter 7 and verse 6. Romans chapter 7 and verse 6. But now we are delivered from the law, that being dead wherein we were held, that we should serve in newness of spirit and not in oldness of the letter. So remember that phrase. At this point in time, ignore everything except, in these two verses, ignore everything except these two parallel phrases: newness of life, newness of spirit. We have been, in our previous meetings, having a discussion about the definition of life. How does the Bible define life? Many instances we find in the Bible there is a call for suicide, killing the life, taking the life, drinking the life, eating the life. Suicide and cannibalism. This is what the Bible's promoting. Literal, right? No matter how we may read these things, in the context of these words, their allegory is not pointing to anything literal. There is an eating, yes. There is a drinking, yes. There is a cannibalism, yes. There is a suicide, yes. But it has nothing to do with our physical self. And Paul just let us know. And this is how the Bible teaches. One phrase lined up with another phrase, similarly written, but certain words are exchanged. Newness of life, newness of spirit. What spirit? Newness of what spirit? Life equals spirit, spirit equals life. In the book of Ephesians chapter 4, Paul lets us in further. Again, even before touching on what this means, just bring in certain verses to let the air clear itself. In Ephesians chapter 4, verse 22 and 23, Paul writes that you put off concerning the former conversation the old man, which is corrupt according to the deceitful lust, and be renewed in the spirit of your what? And be renewed in the spirit of your mind. In the context of spirit within the Bible, spirit equates to life. Life equates to spirit. Spirit equates to mind. Mind equates to life. These three words are interchangeable. They mean the same thing. To consume the life, to sacrifice the life, to quit the life, to deny the life, is to deny the spirit of the mind that we have. The call is to commit suicide not physically, but within the spirit of our devotional or religious mind. It is this mind that is to be let go of. And it is this mind that the living God's chief apostle let us know that we need to consume. We need to consume the life of this individual. We need to consume the spirit of this individual, or in plain modern language or context, we need to consume the mind of this individual. It was the mind that he preached needed to be eaten and consumed, and we cannot consume and eat a mind physically. We can only consume and eat a mind mentally, inwardly, via experience. It was this presentation that challenged them, because it got them to eat a different diet. How do we make that backup faith completely and fully gone? No longer a backup. How do we make it completely and fully gone? It is by consuming a new diet. The individual preached this, and we've gone through this verse many times in our meetings together. We will again in the book of Isaiah chapter 42. The book of Isaiah chapter 42 verses 16 and 17. Isaiah 42, 16 and 17 writes, I will bring the blind by a way that they knew not. I will lead them in paths that they have not known. I will make darkness light before them and crooked things straight. These things will I do unto them and not forsake them. They shall be turned back. They shall be greatly ashamed that trust in graven images, that say to the molten images, you are our gods. And so this philosophy that the living God's chief minister, that he taught when he was alive, it was nothing that was coming out of him that was new. It wasn't new. It was new to the age, because the age relied, as we have seen and as we have picked apart, the age, and as we today still do, the age of that time relied on rituals and policies and standards and theories and dogma and commandments and the conscience of priest and minister above and over, to be the means whereby the divine eye saw you as acceptable or as being justified to step into its presence. So now here you have an individual that's bringing to these people a philosophy that they should have already known. He's bringing to priests and ministers, he's bringing to the Sanhedrin a practice, a philosophy that these ministers should have known. Moses told them this. Moses told them that at some point in time, one will come speaking and preaching the living God's words, and in his name will he go on. We're reading, and thus far we have been learning about what the living God's words are. Not fully yet, not yet. We are getting there, but we're putting the pieces together of what they are. And this individual preached them and gave them in a very genuine, authentic, and inspirational way. A way for the individual to know that I am more than my religious tradition. I am. I'm more, and I can feel and perceive more than what Pastor so-and-so has to say. Huh. Who would have known? But that's what the issue is. The issue is allowing self to come into contact with the self of the devotional character, so that the two can meet, and so that this meeting can produce a genuine and an individual faith that is devotional to the living God in and of itself, without the conscience of another getting in the way of it. This new way, this new trial is exactly what Paul was talking about. The result of a newness of life, or a newness of spirit, or a newness of mind given to the individual. And so to break that habit of the backup, we have to go through an experience where this is taking place. And we cannot go through this experience. We cannot, grow fond of self through the living God's words, and the living God's words through self, in allowing that newly created being to marry the already present natural, and to conduct a life that is, unless there is a sacrificing or a putting down, or as Paul says to the Ephesians, a putting away of the former conversation. So Paul gives it away. Paul is already giving away what I'm trying to keep under until a certain point in time, but this just can't be kept down, because it is a putting away of the former conversation, or it is a putting away of the former mind of devotion, and then a rising or a resurrection of a new devotional thought. And that's what's meant by this new way of turning darkness into light. Because the darkness is, I don't know. I don't know what this experience is without my backup. I don't know what this experience is without the denomination that carried me. I don't know what this experience is without my group. I don't know what this experience is without Pastor so-and-so. I don't know what this experience is without that church 1,000 miles away from me that I catch every Wednesday, Thursday, Sunday, and Saturday. I don't know what this experience is. But there's a new way. And if you're saying that I don't know, that's pretty much step one. And that's the most beautiful step. The next step is to take your original reason for stepping into the Bible into your own hands and letting your hands open. That's called faith, and that's called exercising faith. How do we let that exercise occur? Simple, in the book of Psalms. Psalms chapter 46 and verse 10. Psalms chapter 46 and verse 10. It reads, plain and simple, be still and know that I am God. What does that mean? How can I be still and know that you are God when I don't know you? I only know you through what my belief and my perception that I have inherited or that I have willingly stepped into tells me of you. Yes, every time I think of you, yes, God, I am still. But that's the tricky part. Because once you begin to think that way, now really think about it. Are you really that still? Are you still enough to quit your belief? Because that's what it's about. It's about being still enough, being trusting enough to what you don't know to take on a belief that you don't know in order to let go of what you know, to receive what you should know. Complicated, but it's really not. It's stepping into something, as it says in the Bible, with the mind of a child. He or she that does not have a mind of this child cannot enter into the kingdom of God. In all actuality, the mind of a child, when you think about the fabric of a child will think nothing unless they go through it. A child will think nothing of a subject until they go through it. They will ask questions. They will ask tons and thousands of questions. They will be annoying. And despite whatever questions they ask, they will still be skeptical. And that skepticism will never, ever, ever prevent them from asking more questions or from taking steps to discover those answers. When it comes to our faith, we have to be like that. We get tight and we get rigid by the beliefs that we have and by the confidence that we put on figures or experts and on what they know, that it prevents us from being curious, it prevents us from being creative, it prevents us from being innovative, and it prevents us from being inspired by our own experience. We can't maintain a living faith without these things. And so when the Bible is saying to be still and know that I am God, it is not saying to put your trust in whatever you imagine God to be. It is saying that with the level of knowledge that you have, quit taking in more and experience what you have to know the credibility of it. To know if it is or if it is not the living God. Because despite what will happen, you will know what the living God is. You will know the devotional character of the living God by your experience. And that's, again, an exercising of faith. And that's what this is calling for. When it's calling for a deleting or a removing of the backup, it's calling for an exercising of faith for practical knowledge to live by. For practical knowledge to live by. And this is why the examples and the illustrations that are given in the Bible, the stories that we have, the histories that we have, and the records that we have of individuals exercising faith, this is why they're so important. Because what went on physically is to now go on mentally and inwardly. So just to say, in the book of Hebrews, chapter 11, verses 8 through 10. Hebrews chapter 11, verses 8 through 10. It reads, "By faith, Abraham, when he was called to go out into a place which he should receive for an inheritance, obeyed and went out, not knowing where he went. By faith he sojourned in the land of promise as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles with Isaac and Jacob, for they were the heirs with him of the same promise. For he looked for a city which hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God." Now, you can't tell me that this is not the same experience of what is written in the book of Isaiah 42, 16, and 17. "I will bring the blind by a way that they have known not. I'll lead them in paths that they have not known. I'll make darkness light before them, crooked things straight. These things will I do unto them and not forsake them." This is the same experience. This is the same experience that Abraham experienced. Only difference is context. And even then, not really, because we are being called to go out to a place that we don't know. We're being called, the Bible itself is calling us to step out of our formal traditional thought, or as Paul says, put off your former conversation, put off your traditional or denominational hat. So the Bible is telling us to take that hat off and to go without it. To live our lives, our devotional lives primarily, firstly, to live our devotional lives without it. To just move. And not simply just move in emptiness. To not simply just move without anything. We're moving with the words that are within the Bible. We have left behind the words of our denomination. We have left behind our formal home, and that's what Abraham went through. Abraham was told to leave his home. His home of idols. His home of the perverted version of the Shem philosophy. To leave that. And he left. And so the same call is for us. If we're gonna allow the Bible to be credible presently, we have to allow the Bible to speak in a way that is fashionable. And the Bible is forever in present tense because it is forever fashionable. The call that we are to assume is a call of not necessarily denial or forgetting, not forgetting where we came from, but making sense of where we came from. We're putting off the backup so that we can make sense of where we came from to know where we should go. And so as Abraham had to exercise faith and to go into a place where he did not know and to stay as a stranger, so too we, having a faith that is within, a faith that led us into the Bible, a faith that has been taken captive as Babylon took captive Jerusalem, a faith that has been taken captive by traditional thought, theory, and standard and policy, a faith that has been taken captive. And in some sense, depending on how many years we have been with, in the Bible and are still in the condition that we're in, enslaved for years. We're being called to take that experience and to no longer be slaves. The call is to take back the life of your devotional mind, to no longer be enslaved to the theory, but to develop a perception that is genuine and that you can call your own. The same that Abraham had is the same that we have at this present time, and it will lead to a foundational landmark. And foundational landmark in the sense of a foundational landmark that is individually for us. There is one meaning, but one meaning can be experienced in various ways, equating to the same thing. Nobody can judge anybody for this is the way they do, for this is the way they are, this is their character, this is the expression of their faith. But the root of that expression only has one route to travel, to and from. And it is that devotional character, the devotional character of the living God, that we are to know, that is to temper us, naturally and devotionally, and that is to allow us to fit into the context of that scheme of character. The book of Isaiah. The book of Isaiah chapter 29 and verse 24. The book of Isaiah chapter 29 and verse 24. It reads, and this is the result. This is the result of taking the risk of exercising faith in abandoning our quote-unquote home and journeying into an experience where we don't know what it will be or what the outcome will, is. We hope the outcome will be a closer bond to the living God. We hope the outcome will be a blatant definition of the living God's presence in our life, and it will be. And the result of doing so, Isaiah chapter 29 and verse 24, it reads, they also that erred where? And this is so cool. They also that erred in spirit shall come to understanding, and they that murmured shall learn doctrine. So while we're worried about not knowing, the Bible tells us we will be worried about not knowing, and the Bible lets us know that it is understood that we're going into a place that is unknown, a place of self, a place of discovery, a place of thought, a place of feeling, a place of learning that we don't know. But the end is an understanding for the spirit of our mind. The backup must go so that we can have understanding given to the spirit of our mind for the life of our devotional conversation. It is our devotional conversation's conscience that matters. That's it. Its experience has to be experienced for a practical faith to live by.